They say time heals all wounds, but that's not true for everyone. For Ethan Cole, time didn't heal, it hardened. At 18, he stood in a church filled with people he once called family, faces that had watched him grow, taught him verses, prayed over his life. But that morning, those same people turned their faces away. His mother had just passed, his father was deep in debt, and all Ethan wanted was help, not money, not pity, just kindness. But instead, they whispered, maybe God is punishing them. He was always too proud. His mother should have prayed harder, and when Ethan looked up at the pastor, the man who had baptized him, all he saw was silence. The kind of silence that kills faith that day. Ethan didn't just walk out of the church. He walked out on God. Years later, Ethan would own 5 companies, 3 mansions, and a fleet of cars. But every night, when the world went quiet, he'd lie awake wondering why none of it filled that hole inside him, because some scars aren't visible, and some wounds no amount of money can heal. Ethan Cole grew up in a small town in Texas, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. His mother, Grace, was the gentle soul who volunteered at the local shelter. His father, Robert, was a mechanic who worked long hours to make ends meet. They didn't have much, but they had faith. Every Sunday, they sat in the front pew. Ethan sang in the choir, read verses, and dreamed of becoming a preacher one day. But life doesn't always honor our dreams. When his mother fell ill, the church prayed for her. But when the hospital bills piled up, no one came, and when she passed, those same believers who quoted "Love thy neighbor" were the first to avoid his father's calls. The final blow came at her funeral. Ethan overheard the pastor say to another member, "Sometimes the Lord gives and takes to humble the proud." That sentence broke something in him. He stopped praying that night. He stopped believing. At 18, with nothing but anger and ambition, he swore that he would build a life where no one, not even God, could control him again. And he did. Ethan Cole became a self-made millionaire before 30. Tech startups, investments, real estate, every decision was precise, strategic, ruthless. He didn't chase peace. He chased control, because to Ethan, control meant never being hurt again. But control comes with a cost. He lost touch with his father. He cycled through women like nights in a hotel room, temporary, beautiful, meaningless. And though he smiled at the camera during business events, he'd stare at himself in the mirror afterward and whisper, "I won," even though deep down, he knew he hadn't. By 36, Ethan was rich, admired, untouchable. But when he looked around his penthouse, surrounded by luxury and empty wine glasses, he realized he'd built the perfect prison, golden on the outside, hollow on the inside. And somewhere in the back of his mind, that church bell still rang sometimes when people turn their backs on you. It's easy to blame God for their sins, but what if he never turned away in the first place? Have you ever been hurt so badly by people in church that it made you question your faith? Tell me in the comments, because Ethan's story might just remind you of something you've forgotten. Hey there, my wonderful family and friends. Welcome back. If you're ready to dive into today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love seeing where everyone's watching. And guess what? There's another amazing story coming your way tomorrow. One you definitely don't want to miss. Alright then, let's get started. It was another Friday night in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of night that glittered with sin. Neon lights bled across the wet pavement as luxury cars purred outside Velvet, one of the city's most exclusive clubs. Inside, the bass was a heartbeat. Deep, intoxicating, endless. Ethan Cole sat in the VIP lounge, a bottle of vintage champagne sweating in his hand. Women laughed around him, their perfume heavy, their smiles hollow. It was all noise, a kind of expensive distraction. He leaned back in the leather seat, staring at the crowd like a man watching someone else's dream. The DJ shouted his name at one point. People raised their glasses to toast the tech genius Billionaire, but Ethan barely blinked. He had it all, the fame, the fortune, the freedom, but inside, nothing. Then she walked in. She wasn't like the others. No loud outfit, no forced laughter, She wore a simple black dress, elegant, timeless. Her brown skin glowed under the lights. Her curls framed a face that seemed peaceful, not happy, not excited, peaceful, and that, more than anything, caught Ethan's attention. She moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, like she didn't need to be seen to know she belonged. When their eyes met, it was like the noise of the room dropped an octave. Her name was Alia Brooks. She wasn't impressed by his name or money. When he offered to buy her a drink, she laughed softly. "I can pay for my own. Thank you." That alone intrigued him. Ethan wasn't used to resistance. He was used to women trying to please him. But Alia didn't. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, her words cut through his cynicism like light through fog. They talked about art, music, travel, but it wasn't until 2 a.m., when most people were drunk and careless, that the conversation turned deeper. He asked her casually, "So what keeps you grounded in all this?" Gesturing around the club, she smiled, eyes soft. "God." He froze, mid-sip, then smirked. "You believe in that fairy tale?" Alia tilted her head, unshaken. "I don't believe in fairy tales. I believe in grace." Ethan chuckled. That cold, intellectual laugh that hides pain. Grace. That's a word religious people use when they can't explain why bad things happen. She leaned closer, voice calm but firm. "No. Grace is what lets you survive them." He was taken aback by her tone. Most people shut down when he challenged their faith. But she didn't flinch. So, he tested her. He quoted scripture, word for word, verses about suffering, hypocrisy, injustice. He even recited, "If God is love, why does he let evil win?" She listened, eyes never leaving his. When he finished, she asked, "So you know the Bible?" "I know it better than most believers," he replied sharply. "Then maybe," she said gently, "you stopped reading before the end." That line hit him. It didn't make sense right away, but it stuck, like a splinter in his thoughts. Hours passed, the club emptied. They sat there, surrounded by fading music and flickering lights, talking about everything: loss, betrayal, loneliness. Alia told him she was an art therapist, someone who helped people heal through creativity. "I work with veterans, kids, addicts," she said. "People who think they're beyond saving. And are they?" Ethan asked. "Sometimes." She smiled sadly. "Sometimes they're just waiting for someone to remind them they're not." He didn't realize how long he'd been staring at her until she turned to him and said softly, "You're not as hard as you pretend to be." He laughed it off, but it rattled him. No one had ever said that to him before. Later that night, they ended up at his penthouse. One thing led to another, the kind of intimacy born from emotional exhaustion, not passion. When it was over, she lay on his chest, tracing small circles with her finger. "You know," she said quietly, "Jesus doesn't force himself on anyone. He waits until you want him." Ethan turned his head, surprised. "You talk about God after this?" She smiled faintly. "That's exactly when he belongs most. When we feel furthest from him." He didn't know how to respond. For the first time in years, he didn't have an argument ready. She kissed him one last time, whispered something he couldn't quite catch, and left before dawn. When Ethan woke, the sun cut through the blinds, the sheets were cold, and all he could think about were her words. "He waits until you want him." That morning, Ethan stood by the window, staring at the city below. His empire, his success, his proof that he didn't need anyone. But for the first time, it all felt small. Because what if she was right? What if the emptiness he'd been trying to fill wasn't loneliness, but the absence of something divine? Do you think someone who's lost faith can ever find it again? Or once the trust is broken, is it gone for good? Let me know what you think, because Ethan's next move might just change everything. 3 days. That's how long it took before Ethan realized Alia wasn't coming back. He tried calling, texting, even sent flowers to her workplace. But the address she'd given him didn't exist. It was as if she'd vanished, and for the first time in years, the silence in his penthouse felt unbearable. He went about his usual routines. Gym at 6, meetings at 9, lunch at the Four Seasons, drinks with investors at 7. but everything tasted bland, like chewing air. His assistant noticed. "You okay, boss? You've been off lately." He brushed it off, but inside, Ethan was drowning, because the truth was, Alia hadn't just left him with questions, she'd left him with a mirror, and for the first time, he didn't like what he saw. That night, he couldn't sleep. He poured himself whiskey and sat in his office, staring at an old photo, one he hadn't looked at in years. It was him at 18, bright-eyed, lanky, standing outside a small church in Texas. His parents had been proud members of the congregation, strict, religious, always quoting scripture. He remembered how his father used to say, "God doesn't bless the lazy," and his mother would add, "Faith without works is dead." But they never told him what to do when faith itself dies. Ethan had once believed deeply. He was the kid who volunteered at church, played guitar for the youth choir, even dreamed of becoming a pastor. Until one day, everything changed. When Ethan was 18, his father had lost his job. The family fell behind on bills. They went to their church for help. The same church his father had tithed to for 20 years. The pastor promised to pray for them, but instead, he stood on the pulpit that Sunday and humiliated them. He told the congregation, "Some among us have grown too prideful, and now God humbles them." Everyone knew who he meant. And when Ethan's mother tried to defend her husband, she was silenced. The gossip that followed ruined their reputation. Within months, Ethan's father spiraled into depression. His mother stopped attending service, and one rainy night, his father took his own life. That was the night Ethan stopped believing. He remembered standing in the storm, fists clenched, shouting at the sky, "If you're real, then you're cruel." He never stepped foot in a church again. Now, years later, the pain felt fresh again. He downed his drink and slammed the glass on the counter. He hated how Alia's words echoed in his mind. "He waits until you want him," Ethan whispered to the empty room. "I don't want him." But his voice trembled. He tried to drown the feeling. Music, alcohol, distractions. But nothing worked then. One night, a strange thing happened. He received a notification on his phone, a message from an unknown number. It read, "Ethan, I didn't mean to disappear. I just needed to finish something. You'll see soon." No name, no context, but he knew it was Alia. Attached was a video link. When he opened it, his breath caught. It was Alia, speaking at what looked like a community center. She was leading a small group, a recovery session for ex-addicts and trauma survivors. "We all have scars," she said in the video, "but some scars are just stories waiting for healing." She looked radiant, full of peace, surrounded by people who hung on her every word. At the end of the video, she said, "If you're hearing this, maybe you were meant to. Maybe you're the one who still needs to forgive." The screen faded to black. Ethan sat there in stunned silence. Forgive? He didn't even know how. But something in her tone, something about the way she spoke made him realize she wasn't trying to save him. She was trying to reach him. He stayed up until dawn again. The city skyline glowed beneath him, but he felt small against it. He picked up a Bible he hadn't touched in 20 years. The one his mother had kept on her nightstand. Dusty, fragile, the pages smelled like old grief. He opened to a random verse. It was Psalm 34:18. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." He laughed bitterly. "Where were you when I was crushed?" Then he cried, for the first time since his father's death. Ethan Cole wept. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with faith. Sometimes it begins with exhaustion, when you're too tired to hate, too broken to resist. And that night, Ethan didn't pray, but he also didn't close the Bible. It lay open on the table, a tiny, trembling door. If someone broke your trust in the name of religion, could you ever forgive the idea of faith itself? Or does one betrayal poison everything that comes after? 3 weeks had passed since Ethan received that mysterious video. He'd watched it countless times, memorizing every detail, every word. He'd even started to visit the verse she mentioned, writing bits of scripture on sticky notes and leaving them on his mirror. He didn't know why. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of longing, but something had begun to change inside him. He stopped drinking so much, started showing up to work earlier. He even caught himself holding the elevator door for an intern once, something the old Ethan would never have done. And then, on an ordinary Wednesday morning, everything shifted again. Ethan had agreed to meet his lawyer downtown to finalize a new foundation deal, a charity he'd recently funded for inner-city rehabilitation. Ironically, he didn't even know much about the program. His financial advisor had suggested it to improve his public image, but when he arrived at the event, he froze because there, on stage, speaking into a microphone to a group of recovering addicts, was Alia. She was radiant. Not glamorous, not showy, radiant in the quiet, honest way that made the room lean closer when she spoke. Healing doesn't start with perfection, she said. It starts with honesty. The day you admit you're broken is the day you start to rebuild. Ethan's heart thudded. She hadn't seen him yet. He stood in the back, half hidden behind the crowd. When the event ended, she stepped down from the stage, helping an elderly woman in a wheelchair. She was gentle, patient, kind, and then she looked up, and their eyes met. Her lips parted in shock. Ethan? They met outside the community center, under the shade of an old oak tree. You disappeared, Ethan said, his voice sharper than intended. I told you I had something to finish, she replied calmly. You could have told me what this was, he snapped, motioning toward the center. She sighed softly. Would you have listened? He paused. He wouldn't have. You're different, he said after a long silence. Stronger, happier. I'm free, she said simply, because I stopped running from what broke me. Ethan tilted his head. And you think I'm running? I don't think, she said, eyes locked on his. I know. He didn't answer. Then came the moment that changed everything. You said you knew the Bible, she said softly, but you never mentioned your last name. Cole, he said cautiously. Ethan Cole. Alia blinked, her expression shifting, a flicker of pain, surprise, disbelief. Your father was Pastor Daniel Cole. The words hit like lightning. Ethan's stomach dropped. How do you know that? She hesitated before replying. He was my father's mentor. Ethan froze. Your father? Alia nodded, her voice trembling. My father was one of the men your church helped after he lost everything. He always said Pastor Cole was the reason he got sober. He used to tell me, if it wasn't for Ethan's dad, I'd be dead. Ethan's world tilted. His father, the man he believed had been a hypocrite, abandoned by the church, had still changed lives. He'd helped her father, and now here she was, the daughter of the man his father saved. It wasn't just coincidence. It felt divine. He sat down on the steps of the center, burying his face in his hands. All this time, I blamed him. I blamed God. But maybe I just never saw the full story. Alia sat beside him, silent for a while. Then she said gently, maybe this is the full story. You and me meeting. Maybe it wasn't an accident. He looked up, eyes glassy. You think God planned this? I think God never stopped trying to reach you, she whispered. For the first time, Ethan didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, Ethan visited the community center often, not as a billionaire donor, but as a volunteer. He helped fix the broken computers, sponsored art supplies for therapy sessions, even helped a recovering veteran get a job at his firm. Each visit softened something inside him, and each day, Alia was there, calm, encouraging, quietly pulling him back to a version of himself he thought had died years ago. One afternoon, after a long volunteer shift, Ethan found himself standing outside the center again. The sky glowed pink and orange, the kind of sunset that made the city look holy. He turned to Alia. You once said Jesus doesn't force himself on anyone, he said quietly. That's right. She smiled. Well, he paused, heart pounding. What if someone finally wants him back? Tears welled in her eyes. Then he's been waiting all along. Sometimes the miracle isn't that God speaks, it's that he keeps whispering until you finally stop talking long enough to listen. Ethan wasn't saved yet, not in the religious sense, but something inside him had shifted from resistance to surrender, and that was enough. Do you believe some people come into our lives by fate, or do we create those moments ourselves? Was Alia sent to save Ethan, or was she the result of his heart finally being ready to change? The following months became a kind of rebirth for Ethan Cole. He wasn't preaching or pretending to be a saint. He still stumbled, still questioned, still fought the urge to slip back into old habits. But he was trying, for the first time since he was a teenager. Ethan felt like he was living for something. Alia's influence had softened him. Their conversations became his therapy. He even started attending small group sessions at the community center. Though he never prayed aloud. "It's okay," Alia once said with a gentle smile. "You don't have to have all the words. God listens to silence too." It was working. Until the night everything nearly fell apart. It happened during a business gala. One of those elite fundraisers filled with champagne smiles and diamond lies. Ethan had donated millions to rebuild rehab facilities across the state. And the media couldn't get enough of the philanthropist CEO. But as the cameras flashed and the applause swelled, Ethan felt something hollow open inside him again. That old emptiness whispering, "This isn't real. You're still the same man." That's when she appeared. Sierra, an ex from his old life. Beautiful, seductive, dangerous in the way nostalgia often is. "Ethan Cole," she purred, touching his arm. "Still saving the world $1 at a time?" He smirked awkwardly. Something like that. She leaned closer, whispering, "Don't tell me the great Ethan Cole found religion. You used to laugh at those people." Her words stung. "People change," he said. But his voice wavered. Sierra smiled knowingly. Or maybe they just pretend better. And in that moment, surrounded by flashbulbs and fake praise, Ethan realized she was right. He was pretending. He was trying to do good. But deep down, he still didn't know why. Was it guilt? Alia? Fear? So when Sierra invited him to catch up in private, he hesitated and almost said yes. Almost. His phone buzzed. It was Alia. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. Finally, he picked up, irritated. "Alia, I'm kind of..." Her voice was panicked. "Ethan, the center. There's a fire." He froze. "What?" "We were hosting an overnight recovery session. Something sparked in the old kitchen. Some of the patients are still inside." He didn't think, he just ran. By the time Ethan arrived, flames were licking the night sky. The community center, the one place that had saved him, was burning. Fire trucks surrounded the scene. Sirens wailing, water spraying. But chaos ruled. And then he saw her. Alia, coughing, covered in soot, shouting to the firefighters, "Two people are still inside." She screamed. "I tried to get them, but..." Before anyone could stop him, Ethan ran straight past the barricade. "Ethan, no!" she cried. The heat hit him like a wall. The air tasted like ash. He pushed through the smoke, heart pounding, searching rooms until he found them. Two men trapped under debris. He heaved the first one up, dragging him toward the exit, then the second. But as he turned back for the last man, the roof gave way, and Ethan was buried in fire and splintered wood. When Ethan came to, everything was quiet to quiet. He was lying in smoke and rubble, his chest crushed, his breath ragged, and in the haze, he heard it. A voice, soft, familiar, his father's voice. "Son," he turned and saw him, not as he remembered, not tired and broken, but radiant, peaceful. "Dad? You've been angry a long time," his father said gently. But anger isn't the opposite of faith. Indifference is. Ethan's tears mixed with soot. "I blamed you for everything, and I loved you through it," his father said. Even now, then another voice, warm, kind, deeper than sound itself, whispered through the burning light, "You were never alone, Ethan." A warmth spread through his body. Not pain, not fear, just peace. And then, he woke up. He was in a hospital bed, oxygen mask on, 4 in his arm. Alia was beside him, asleep in a chair, her hand gripping his. When she stirred and saw his eyes open, she burst into tears. "You're alive! Oh my God, Ethan, you're alive!" He smiled weakly. Guess he's not done with me yet. The doctors later told him it was a miracle. The roof collapse should have killed him, but somehow, he'd survived with only minor burns and a fractured rib. Alia said quietly, "You saved 3 people that night, including yourself." He looked at her, eyes full of something he hadn't felt in years. Faith. Sometimes it takes fire to burn away what's false. Sometimes it takes near death to remember what life really means. Ethan didn't become a preacher or a saint. He didn't suddenly have all the answers, but he did start something new. A foundation in his father's name to rebuild the community center. This time as a place of refuge for anyone searching for a second chance, and every plaque, every brick, carried the same words engraved into the stone. Grace waits for those who stop running. If you lost your faith because of pain, but life gave you a sign to believe again, would you take it? Or would you still question it like Ethan once did? Because sometimes, the question isn't whether God exists, it's whether we'll ever let him in. Time moved differently after the fire. Ethan's mansion, his cars, his business empire. None of it felt the same anymore. He used to wake up to the sound of stock alerts and phone calls. Now, he woke up to birds outside his small suburban window, in a home much humbler than before. He'd sold his penthouse and donated a massive portion of his wealth to rebuilding the Cole Community Center, named after his father. It wasn't just a building now, it was a sanctuary. There were rooms for counseling, art therapy, youth programs, addiction recovery, and every Friday night, Alia led open discussions titled Faith for the Wounded. Ethan never missed a session. He wasn't the old Ethan Cole anymore, the arrogant billionaire. Chasing women and applause, he still drove nice cars. But not to impress anyone, he wore simpler clothes. He laughed more, and sometimes when he walked through the new center, he'd stop and stare at a framed picture hanging in the main hallway. The first version of the building, burnt and broken, with a verse underneath, "He brings beauty from ashes." A verse Alia had chosen. One night, after a meeting, a teenage boy approached him, nervous, shy, holding a torn notebook. "Mr. Cole, I heard about what you did, about the fire." "You did?" Ethan asked, smiling gently. "Yeah, I don't really believe in God, but my mom says what happened to you was a miracle." Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe she's right. Or maybe it just took me losing everything to see what was always there." The boy hesitated. Do you think God still cares about people like me?" Ethan thought for a moment, remembering his 18-year-old self. Angry at the church, at his family, at God himself. Then he nodded slowly. "I think God cares especially about people like you. Because I was you once." The boy smiled, wiping his eyes, and as Ethan watched him walk away, something deep inside him healed a little more. Months later, as the center prepared for its grand reopening ceremony, a stranger appeared, an older woman with soft eyes and trembling hands. Ethan was overseeing the final touches when she called his name. "Ethan Cole?" He turned and froze. It was Mrs. Holloway, his old church mentor, the one who'd cast him out years ago when he'd questioned everything. The woman whose harsh words had helped drive him away from faith. He almost turned around, but then he saw the tears in her eyes. "I heard what you've done," she said, voice quivering. "I came to say, I was wrong." Ethan didn't speak. He just listened as she continued. "I was so focused on rules that I forgot love. You were just a boy who needed grace. And we failed you." Her apology shattered years of bitterness in an instant. Ethan exhaled deeply, the weight of decades leaving his shoulders. He finally said, "You didn't fail me. I just needed to walk my own road to find him again." She smiled through tears. "Then maybe we both found him anew." It was a quiet, healing moment. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but real. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't need thunder. Just 2 broken hearts meeting halfway at the reopening ceremony. Hundreds gathered under the golden evening sky. The mayor was there, the press, the volunteers. But when Ethan stepped to the microphone, he didn't sound like a CEO. He sounded like a man who had been humbled, burned and rebuilt. "Years ago," he began softly, "I swore I'd never say God's name again. I thought faith was for fools, and love was a lie. He paused, scanning the crowd, and spotted Alia smiling in the front row. But then I realized something. The people who hurt me weren't God. They were just people. And my pain wasn't proof of his absence. It was proof of my need for him. The crowd was silent, every word sinking deep. I learned that you can be rich in everything and still be bankrupt inside. You can sleep on silk sheets and still wake up empty. But the moment you let go, really let go, something shifts. He lifted his gaze toward the crowd. This center isn't about religion. It's about restoration. It's about remembering that even broken faith can still rebuild a life. Applause erupted. Tears shimmered in strangers' eyes. After the event, Ethan and Alia sat together on the roof of the building, watching the stars. "You really changed," she said quietly. "No," he said with a small smile. "I think I just came home." Alia looked at him, eyes full of affection. "So what now, Mr. Cole?" "Now," he said, gazing upward. "Now I just live, one honest day at a time." And as the night breeze carried laughter and faint gospel music from the streets below, Ethan whispered the words he once swore he'd never say again. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Maybe faith isn't about believing without question. Maybe it's about asking and still choosing to hope anyway. Ethan's story reminds us, you can curse heaven, you can walk away, you can bury your heart under money, women, and pride. But when grace wants to find you, it will. Because love, real love, doesn't chase perfection, it redeems the lost. Have you ever walked away from faith, and then life led you back to something deeper? If so, what was the moment that made you believe again?
Thank you for watching all the way through. If this story moved you, the next one will surprise you in ways you won't expect. Go ahead and click the video on your screen. Your next story awaits.